This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
Nowadays, it seems pretty much everywhere you look, there's some kind of scam, whether somebody texts you and says like, oh, you're due for this bill. There's something going on now with the DMV. They try to tell you your license is expired or what have you. There's always somebody out there scheming. And it seems that the fraudsters, they're becoming more sophisticated. Listen to this. A guy named Scott who got a call from his bank, or at least he thought it was his bank, with knowledge of all of his recent debit transactions. The caller said that the card had been compromised and sent someone to his house to collect it. That right there is red flag number one for me. Yeah, they snipped the card in half at the front door, and they actually left with the broken card. So in less than 2 hours, over $20,000 vanished from Scott's account. Losses from scams reported by Americans over 60 soared to nearly $700 million last year alone. And now the bad actors are armed with AI. That's a big thing here. Audio, video, things that are fake. You hear about them all the time. Somebody calls and says they've been kidnapped in another country, and it sounds like your niece or nephew or your grandchild. Next thing you know, you're wiring money. These things are crazy. So when clients encounter something that sounds too good to be true here, and it just doesn't seem right, are you often their first go-to call before they make a big mistake, Mark?
I don't think we really are their first go-to call, although I did have an experience with this just a couple weeks ago. I mean, hopefully there's family members around to help. I think of this experience a couple weeks ago where I have a client who, we met her about 4 years ago, and then she moved back east to be near family, and it turned out the son was financially abusive of her. And so she moved back here to Vegas, and then she called me about 2 weeks ago and told me that she had this great opportunity that had come up, and just her language, she's in her mid to late 80s, and she's single, obviously no family around her because the son was being abusive of her finances. So she's back here living in assisted living basically on her own, and she calls me, and it turned out that, once we finally, 15 minutes into the conversation, she finally admitted that she had won $34 million. And I thought, excuse me? Because then I went into son mode, I was Papa Bear mode kind of thing. It just made me so angry because there's a warm place in hell, I think, for people who take advantage of the elderly. And she was supposed to meet this guy at the bank, so we invited her to meet at the bank next door to us, where I would be there with her and the bank officers to greet this gentleman and kind of vet the situation. And long story short, the meeting never happened, and she went silent. She realized that it was a fraud. But it's just crazy, when you hear these things and you think, someone comes to your door, that red flag you mentioned, people ought to know better, but sometimes they don't. We get dependent. We come from an era, a time when people are more trusting. And so I just pray that there's family members and friends around to help us. I just think it's so important that we have family meetings, that we're open with one another. We actually have a habit in my office now where we're having clients sign what we call authorized letters, which basically give us permission to reach out to family members when we think that one of our clients is going to be abused, or if perhaps, as is more commonly the case, there are cognitive problems that develop, early signs of dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, things like that. And so we've actually got another case right now where we're, within the next week or two, we're going to have to meet with some dear friends of mine's children and talk to them about how some changes have happened. And so, these are hard issues, and I just say, build your tribe around you. Get your family, get your friends, get your church members, whoever you make as your family, involved in your life. Don't live in this silo alone where people can take advantage of you like that, because it is a sad day and time that we're in when people do things like this. And my personal belief is it's going to catch up to them. And again, warm place in hell, it's deserved. If you take advantage of people's life savings like that, that's, you reminded me of another situation. But I was in the hospital with my son recently. He was in there for a week, and the nurse came in and heard what I did, and she opened up to me about how her husband had taken his life savings. They had actually done a very good job. He was in a blue-collar occupation, but had been a tremendous saver. Had saved over $500,000 for his age. That was quite impressive. Long story short, he learned about this wonderful crypto opportunity and yada, 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 you can see where the story goes. He ended up losing everything, and so we had to talk about ways, to recover that. So, again, the message is, if something sounds too good to be true, It probably is.
Probably is.
It probably is. And follow your gut. Vet things. Check out the advisors that you're working with. Check out the organizations that are soliciting you. Because once that money's gone, as in the case of this dear nurse, I mean, she was wonderful. And yet my heart was breaking because there was really no magic wand that I had to be able to rescue them from losing literally decades worth of hard-earned savings. So
yikes.
These things happen, and
they do all the time. So if you're out there and, maybe you are kind of trying to help your parents with some of these things, they're older. Those are the folks that are 9 times out of 10, I think, pinpointed for these things. That sound too good to be true. But even if you get something in the mail or you get a weird statement that kind of looks funny, before you start calling folks and giving them your whole life and your Social Security and all the numbers, give Mark a call and go, hey, have you heard about this? Or is this real? Or, is this a scam? Right? We want to help you from making these mistakes. Again, that phone number, 702-996-4050, 702-996-4050. That website, mygoldenyearsroadmap.com. Someone in their late 50s sent a letter to an advice column, and they're saying that they're set to inherit an IRA account, and the share is going to be about $150,000. And the guy admits that he doesn't know anything about investing, and he's not interested in doing this on his own. So if a client came to you with a similar situation, what are some of the options that they have to capitalize on this, this inheritance?
Oh, wow, there's lots of options. And I love this example because it's becoming increasingly common. There's a tremendous transfer of wealth that's happening now from the, to the baby boomers. And so these kind of scenarios are very, very common for us. And if the money is IRA, individual retirement account money, then it comes with certain tax advantages. And unfortunately, too many people just cash out the inheritance and then it's, frittered away. Within a period of 12 to 18 months, that money's often gone. Whenever money comes to you with tax advantages like an IRA, then people should slow down and learn what their options are, because when you inherit an IRA, you also inherit the tax advantages that are associated with that. And if it's from a spouse, then it continues as if it was your own IRA account. But if it's from a non-spouse who gives that money to you, a parent or uncle or grandparent or whoever who gives that money to you, then there's an entirely different set of rules, and it gets a little bit involved, and we have to take that on a case-by-case basis. But the general rule is that you've got 10 years over which time you can spend that money down. And if people are wise, we can show them how to strategically reposition that money so that we can either duplicate or even improve on the tax advantages that they inherited. So be very, very cautious about just cashing out an account like that, because not only is it a big hit, all that money lands on top of your current earnings and often forces you into a higher tax bracket, but you're losing the most important part, and that's the tax advantages. Tax advantage money is more valuable than non-tax advantage money. And so we really have to look at your opportunities. Is it taxable? Is it tax deferred? Is it tax free? And then position our thinking and our investing accordingly. So come visit with us. If you have questions like this is very common for people to get inheritances, and we do this a lot to help folks out.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you mentioned here about the tax time bomb. A lot of folks might go, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm handing down $150,000 to so-and-so, but they don't realize that taxes, they're going to get hit really hard. So all that hard work you did to build this income and this wealth isn't exactly going to be the same when that person finally receives it. So it's about protecting you. It's about protecting them, but it's also about you just being educated on your plan and your money, taking control there. Again, that phone number, 702-996-4050. If you want to come in for this tax analysis, we'll do that for you as well. 702-996-4050. Taxes has been a huge conversation for a long time now, and we talked about the big, beautiful bill a few moments ago. We also know there's some tax items there that you can take advantage of with taxes staying the same rate. Taxes, I think, for a lot of people, they only think about it, come April, when it should really be a annual, year-long conversation.
Constant.
Am I right about that?
Yeah, year-round, yeah. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. I always say that. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. And too many people are paying more in taxes than is necessary. There's a lot we can do. We actually have far more control over this situation than most people realize. And if you don't understand these issues and get with an advisor, come visit with us. We can show you how to save taxes significantly over the long run. You just gave this great example about the inheritance, and it brings me back to the reminder I have to give parents is that if we're going to leave money to our kids, we have a choice. We can leave it to them in a taxable manner or in a tax-deferred account, which will be fully taxable to them, or we can leave it to them tax-free. And sometimes it makes sense for the parents to pay the taxes now through what's called a Roth conversion when we're dealing with IRA money. Pay the tax now so that the kids can get that money in a tax-free manner, because odds are they're going to inherit it during their peak earning years. But the problem is if they inherit it before it was converted, they don't get to convert it. And so this is really something that the parents need to be conscious of. A big part of retirement planning is estate planning. It's the realization that there's often going to be money left over for the people and causes that we love. And so if we strategize properly, we can do things like qualified charitable deductions, for example. We can show people how to really maximize the gifts that they give to their loved ones and to the organizations that are meaningful to them. So we always say, come visit with us. You know, this is complementing part of our services, and we absolutely love helping people with this, especially when it gets to charitable stuff. That gets close to my heart, you know, when we can do a lot of good in the world just by being conscious and acting before our passing. Otherwise, we're typically leaving people with a mess.
Yeah, and that's not what we want to do, folks. I know that's not what you want to do, especially when you've worked so hard for that money. Again, this tax analysis is a great opportunity to sit down and get all these questions answered, dot all the I's, cross all the T's. Again, 702-996-4050, 702-996-4050. That website, mygoldenyearsroadmap.com. You know, on the show, we talk a lot about the fear of spending your retirement money. And it turns out the stars are sort of just like us. Listen to this. Actor Seth Rogen says he can relate, as he explained recently on the Armchair Expert podcast.
I'm afraid I'm going to die with too much money. That is my fear. I don't have children, and I'm afraid I'm going to die and be like, I could have had a good place on the beach. I'm saying, like, I don't want to die with like $10 million in the bank that I could have spent doing fun, alive things. You know what I mean?
A jet to Paris on a whim.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to look back. I could have been jetting.
Oh my gosh, that's never. I could have been jetting. Well, listen, I think a lot of us can identify with some of it. We don't have the millions of dollars like him to say I could have been jetting, that's for sure. But how do you help clients strike that right between the balance of, you know, spending and enjoying and making sure they don't run out of money, but making sure they're not holding back on the fun times too?
Well, that's a whole lot of conversation, and I'm not sure that any single human being ever gets that totally right, because none of us generally know exactly when we're going to die. Hopefully we don't know exactly when we're going to die. You know, if we knew that, it'd be very easy to plan these things. But because we don't, typically people end up leaving money behind for the people that they love, because we need to be conservative in our expectations. And so there's two parts to that equation. For most Americans, we're not in Seth Rogen's situation where we're worried about leaving, you know, excessive amounts behind. For most people, it's how do we make a limited amount of money just last long enough? And so that's, I think, by far the bigger challenge. And that's absolutely where my team specializes, because we don't work with the Seth Rogens of the world. We work with mom and pop America purposely. We work with the people that the big wirehouses don't want to work with. You know, people who have less than $1 million typically are our client. And so their issue is how do we make the money last so that we don't run out? And we're extremely good at helping people at that. But the flip side is we do have a number of clients who will never, ever spend through all the money that they have. And so then we have the fun opportunity of helping them learn to live up to their privileges, as we call it. Because many people who, I mean, like myself, I mean, I have a hard time spending money because I deal with these issues, and so I want to live under my means. But after doing that for decades, sometimes it gets hard to go out and spend. But this idea of living up to your privileges can be extremely difficult for some people who have been conditioned to savings. And so we're coaching them, those people, how do we create a structured spending plan? Sometimes we actually create a structured stream of income that's purely labeled paycheck. And because they know it's coming to them every month, they go out and they spend it because they know it's going to come every month that they live. And so we've got both sides of that equation. And it's really all about having real conversations. And if you do have too much money, like Seth says, well, I'm a big advocate of multiplying it by giving it away. There's all sorts of charitable things that we teach our clients to do to maximize their impact in the world. And so if you're charitably inclined and you want to leave a legacy that lasts beyond yourself, well, we can show you how to really really multiply what you have to create a whole lot of good in the world, and do so with tax advantages. So it's a lot less painful for you and a lot better for the world. So yeah, I'd say there's two parts to that problem, and power to Seth, I'd say, because too many of these big income celebrities, sports people, movie star people run out of money. We never hear that backside of the story because they never had any kind of structure to their behavior.
Yeah.
And they end up impoverished, and it's tragic, particularly with athletes who never got the training.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts' principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.